I believe that anytime you have something that's done for the ease of humans, it's probably to the detriment of the bees. About 16 years ago, my husband and I bought a small farm in Washington, and a year later, a friend of mine had some bees that a neighbor had in a backyard. They just bought a house. So I said, sure, we take bees. I knew nothing about them, but we have a farm. Bees are good. Bees are such an intrinsic part of nature on a world scale. And what they do for humans is just a minuscule part of it. So we got the bees up here, and I would go out and sit next to the bees. I realized really early on that they could have cared less that I was sitting there. You know, here I am all protected from the bees, and they just bzz, bzz, went flying by, which was kind of cool because I could start removing some of the bee equipment. And I had this little prayer that I did while I was in this reverie with the bees. And it was, you know, I'm willing to do anything, dear ones. I just don't know exactly what to do. And if you could just share with me somehow this information. And one morning I woke up in the morning and I just had this like a little voice that came in and started explaining stuff about bees, things I had never read or heard from before about the nature of bees. And I quickly wrote it all down. And then the next morning the same thing happened again. Over the next, I think 4 years, I just had journal upon journal of notes from the bees. And it completely altered any of my perceptions about bees and also the way that I worked with them, the way that I interacted with them. I began to be aware of this consciousness of the bees that was so much more a part of nature, as am I a part of nature, and interacting not as the dominant I'm the caretaker of the bees. It wasn't like that. It was much more interactive, and I saw the responsibility for the role that they have within what they do here in the world. It was amazing to me. So eventually I ended up writing a book. When we build our protective grid over the land, we also incorporate the heart space energy of those who live upon that land. These protective grids overlap and entwine with other grids, energetically connecting and reinforcing our prayer for the land. We acknowledge the presence of humans on the land, and each too is woven into the fabric as an anchor point. A human with a force of will oriented toward bringing out the goodness of the land and all who dwell there is an adjunctive support to the work of the bees. Most of the work that's done around bees is about how to make it easier on humans to take care of bees or get the products from bees that we want, like honey or wax. And that really diminishes them. It takes them down to being a small part that's only necessary for the things that they bring to humans. Well, that's not right. I'm more interested in bees living the way that nature intended and fulfilling their purposes as far as nature is concerned. So just if you take a hive, for example, most of the hives that people keep bees in these days are much thinner than is needed, and we can manipulate the boxes so that it's easy for us to get in there and do things and take honey out, and it's all for human convenience. But if you look at where bees really live, they live inside of trees, and they have thick walls of tree trunk all the way around there. That allows them to regulate their temperature to keep cool in the summer, warm in the winter, with very little extra effort on their part, which conserves their resources, the honey that they're eating. It helps make it easier for the bees to keep the babies at the exact right temperature they need for their gestation. So I'm really much more interested at this point in, if I'm going to give them habitat, that it be more like tree trunks. And I actually see my main role as providing forage. Good, healthy forage, plenty of food for everyone to eat, and that's about it. A lot of beekeepers keep bees, but they don't think of what the bees are going to go out and eat. And I think, again, that's a mistake. That's something where if you're going to have a whole lot of beehives in your backyard, you better have a whole lot of forage around. When you introduce a lot of bees into an area, immediately you'll start to see a reduction in the native pollinators. Native pollinators are like bumblebees and mason bees and thousands of other little ones. There are different kinds of pollinators that are matched up to every flower, and we need all of them. A person who listens to the land, who observes and considers forward motion, who provides the needed and requested materials and labor for the development of the land, is known as reliable and is woven into the grid. These poles of being anchor and stabilize the grid. Thus it is important when any being in the grid leaves or a new being arrives that one goes and tells the bees. Telling us of these changes brings us into a deeper and more communicative partnership. This act both encourages and tempers the human will, so our wills align with the good of the land, our shared home.